For our audience out there, if you have any advice, think about the parents having an athlete or athletes reaching to their next level. What advice would you give that athlete?
I think as cliche as it might sound, is just have that.
What we're seeing is like there's always that yin yang, it's like, yes, okay, they're able to play more freely until it doesn't work, and then what? Today we have Joe Getzin, my coach, friend, and mentor, here to share an amazing pathway of watching multiple generations compete and where he's at now currently in his career.
Athletes are physically bigger and stronger than what they've ever been, and that's growing exponentially, just size-wise and physical ability. Yet at the same time, because of parts of the mental development, they're a little bit behind what I would say 40 years ago, what you expected an 18 or a 20-year-old to do. Just developmentally, they haven't been exposed to that for so many different reasons, not right or wrong. And because of that, they need that, nurturing through the mental side of it.
That's exactly it. I mean, you nailed it. Hi, welcome to the Next Level Advantage Show. Today we have Joe Getzin, my coach, friend, and mentor, here to share an amazing pathway of watching multiple generations compete and where he's at now currently in his career. So welcome, Joe. We're glad you're here.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So Joe, let's just start right off, right? I would love to ask you, how did you get into volleyball? A little bit of background. What's your connection? How did it all started?
Well, I think for me, the thing that always stood out to me was watching the 72 Olympics on TV and watching a short highlight of the Japanese team training, and they were jumping over things and under things, and the coaches were beating balls at them, and somehow that clicked with me, and I went back to sixth grade PE, and when we had 20 guys on a side or 20 elementary students on a side, and said, no, this is how we do it, and started moving people around, much to the chagrin of my PE teacher. So that was probably my first coaching experience. And then kind of got lost in, ran track and cross country in high school, worked out of high school, didn't go right to college, and then started playing picked up volleyball in some bar leagues and that sort of thing. And just enjoyed that, kind of clicked with me again, how much I always liked volleyball, I think. So ended up going to an adult camp at Graceland College in Lamoni, Iowa, and met my future college coach there. He was one of the clinicians and said, hey, do you want to play volleyball in college? And I wasn't doing anything at the time, just working. I said, sure, that sounds good. Better than working a real job. So ended up at George Williams College, and George Williams was the founder of the YMCA, and got involved. Several past Olympic coaches were from George Williams, and a lot of good background there, and had my playing days in the MIVA of old. Then I think my freshman year, I sprained an ankle pretty good, and my rehab was done at Sports Performance Rehabilitation Incorporated, SPRY.
Right.
And the person that did my rehab was Kay Rognes and Rick Butler, who also ran Spry Volleyball. And they were running a juniors organization, junior volleyball club, out of the West Chicago area, western suburbs of Chicago. And started talking to them. I was in a PE major at that time, and they said, hey, we're looking for coaches, and got hooked up with them in the coaching world. And that was my first nibble on what coaching was.
That's what started the whole thing, huh?
Yep.
Wow. So for those of you that don't know, I've known Joe for almost 30 years. He was my coach. And I just, and my brain is kind of exploding hearing all of these details because I've only heard like bits and pieces. So that is amazing to go from just so many life events to bring you into the sport, like so much alignment. And for those that don't know, SPRY, Sports Performance, is obviously still one of the top clubs in the country and competes at a high level. And it makes a lot of sense that that's where you got your roots, because you definitely have that technical side of training.
Well,
so it's crazy.
At the time, this was in the mid 80s, they still are a very good club. They were the powerhouse of the volleyball world. And Rick took a very Eastern style of coaching, very Asian style, lots of reps, kind of different than what today's world is, where it's just play and through play you get better. Their method at that point was just rep them to death, and that's what the Japanese and Chinese and the Asian countries were doing. And Rick had was very influenced by that. Took his teams over to Japan quite a few times, and so through that, that's where I had gotten a lot of my background and technical development was from that. Also coached at that time, and I think it was in '87 in the inaugural professional volleyball league here and Major League Volleyball. Rick took his club team to Japan for 2 weeks, so I was actually the interim head coach for the Chicago Breeze way back then.
I
Wow.
found that detail in some of my research too. I was like, look at Joe, Chicago Breeze, man.
Awesome. I love it. And then, do you want to share a little more about the coaching journey after the playing and this beginning of training, kind of what happened in the coaching arena?
Well, like most coaches, we were vagabonds and end up going all over the place, following opportunities. My first collegiate opportunity was at the University of Arizona, and we actually had a player from Spry go to the U of A, and she was doing a nice job for them. I had relocated with my wife, who had gotten a job with the YMCA of Tucson, so we were in that area, and the connection was kind of made that I was responsible for some of the training of Kelly Waggy at the time, and so they needed an assistant coach. So started my collegiate coaching experience at the University of Arizona in the Pac-10, and I was there for 3 years doing that. Then my wife got a different job up in Prescott, Arizona, and kind of moved up that way. And in Tucson, I had ran a club down there and just continued with junior volleyball and the impact that I saw it having on kids, and loved that. So continued that up in Prescott, where there really wasn't much of anything, and that's where Stasia came into my life, and we got to work together there. From there, I went to the University of South Carolina, and my wife stayed back in Arizona. She loved her job, and it just was an opportunity for me. I actually was going to go to northern Arizona and make a little bit of a long distance commute back and forth to work with Kim Hudson at NAU. And she called me and said, "Hey, you have the job, except I just accepted a different job. What do you know about South Carolina?" And I said, "Well, it's south of North Carolina. That's
Kind of
that's
far.
about as much as I knew about it."
Yeah.
So with that, I ended up going to South Carolina for 3 years, and my wife and I did the long distance relationship. Well, that worked for a little bit, but then we got pregnant, and can't. One thing being a long distance husband, it's another thing being a long distance father. So moved back to Prescott, Arizona, and started working at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, and through that started a volleyball program for ERAU.
Which was awesome.
Yeah.
Still in existence.
It's still in existence, doing very well in the NAIA level. And then from there, I went to the University of Portland, up in Portland, Oregon, in the West Coast Conference as a head coach for a year. We decided after being in Arizona, Portland weather wasn't for us, a little bit different climate. So we decided we did not like the North Pacific Northwest weather. And so I went back to the University of South Carolina as an assistant coach for another stint there. And then after that, I became the head coach at the University of Mississippi for 12 years in the SEC. After a good run in the SEC, I ended up here at Winona State University in Winona, Minnesota.
What a journey. I have some notes to share. You have helped develop All-Americans, both at Ole Miss and Winona State University. What were those athletes meant to you? What did they mean to the team when you were building that?
Well, there's, a shout out to both Regina Thomas, who was a third team All-American at the Division I level, just a phenomenal athlete who really worked very hard to get those accolades. And, the thing with any kind of accolades that you get individually in a team sport, the team has to perform at a certain level for those athletes to get that recognition. And thankfully, we had a couple good runs at Ole Miss, made the NCAA tournament 3 times. And Regina was a big part of that run there. And she was a young lady that actually ended up going and playing professionally. And when we got her, she couldn't serve over the net. Now, she could jump out of the gym and she learned how to attack, but didn't have an arm swing to really serve very well. And one of my proudest moments is her FaceTiming me going, Coach, guess what? I served in a professional volleyball match. So that was pretty cool. And then Megan Flom was the first team All-American here at Winona State. Should have been the National Player of the Year with the numbers that she put up in her senior year. And another just phenomenal athlete and young lady that worked her tail off to get where she was. And, probably had our best year here ever at Winona State because of someone like Megan.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. And also a great winning record in Winona, by the way. Did you surpass 350 career wins in Winona? Is that right?
Yeah, we've racked up a few here, but I always like to have that adage that the wins will come if you're just doing things the right way. And a lot of times the wins don't. Some of my best coaching seasons weren't the winning ones. It was the ones that we eked out with less talent, more wins. The wins don't always tell the whole story.
Yeah, I totally agree with you that some of the best seasons are the ones that aren't always resulting in the wins. And I think you're humbly describing Megan. I know we had her on our show, and it was really neat to hear her share her perspective of you. And even now that she's coaching, how much she appreciates what you really did for her and how a lot of her success was because of you. And I think as an athlete, she saw that, but now it's really cool to see how she really sees it. And it was fun to hear that kind of perspective. And we shared how we related, because as we mentioned, like I played for you while you were here in Prescott, and you took our club from being, I think, like in the bottom half of club all the way into the top 8 and open in 3 years. So it really speaks to your passion and your training and your consistency that you provide to these athletes. And luckily, on all those journeys that you just shared, you would always offer me an internship that I needed to fulfill for school. So I got to go to all those colleges and stay connected with you. And then ultimately, we made this big pivot in Winona to the mental fitness side. And wondering if you can just tell everybody a little bit about that and how we kind of got there with working with your team, which was now almost 5 years ago, which is crazy.
Hard to believe. If I remember correctly, I think my wife and I were traveling across the country on vacation or something like that, and I connected with you, and you were telling me some of your latest journeys and how you were pursuing some more degrees, fancy degrees, shall we say, in your journey of, your therapy and so forth. And, it was at that time, just some of the things you were saying and how it affected you at work with what you were currently doing, how that was so relevant to the world of coaching and what I was experiencing on a day in, day out basis with my athletes. And there was a little bit of a shift in the culture of younger players and their expectations and what they perceived coaching was to them and so forth. And as we were sharing stories, you said, well, gee, I think I have something that can help them and what you were learning about. And so you said, hey, do you mind if I start talking to your players? Or I think I can help your team understand, one from the perspective of having played for me and the style of coaching that I utilized, that it would be something that might benefit them. And so this production or, joint venture kind of started, and your company, you started maybe pivoting a little bit more and making it a little bit more about athletics and helping young athletes understand how this all works. And, we've seen tremendous success, or I have, especially with my teams, just how they have responded to understanding themselves a little bit better, and through that, understanding me as a coach. And of course, this old dog has learned a few new tricks, so that has been really good for me and has made, coaching was starting to become a little bit frustrating for me because what I had done in the past wasn't working with my current team, not this current team, but the team at the time. So your interjection and the stuff that you've been able to do with them has really helped our program at Winona State take off to a new level.
Oh, thank you. It really was such a full circle moment. Like I remember that call so vividly with you and A, which shout out to A for also here along the journey. And but just really seeing so clearly where the stuff that I had learned through the trauma lens and the nervous system and neuroscience and all those things, how it really did impact performance. And even knowing myself that I needed a program like that when I competed for you and went on to play at college. And it was just cool. And I remember really clearly how seeing you as a coach, realizing you were learning how to coach a third generation of athletes with totally different expectations, ideas of what volleyball was, what coaching was, and I really do support what you've said. Like, and I tell people, like, you are an old dog that's learned new tricks. Like, it's incredible. And it was fun having Megan, like I mentioned on the show, because she even reflected on that and just, being able to see how much you're invested in modeling and learning just as much as you ask of your athletes is, I think, something that I just really appreciate. And it's been fun to be back in the athletic arena because of our relationship, because I had left coaching and volleyball completely behind. And this was my first venture back. And I can't even imagine my life without athletics. And Ray got to come on full time, and our family gets to do this, online entrepreneurial world, and just pretty fantastic. So thank you for the phone call. That changed all of our lives. I think that
all for the good, all for the good.
So Joe, let's piggyback on that, because you have seen multiple generations, you have coached multiple generations. So for the parents, the listeners, the viewers out there, what can you share with your experience? What have you seen from different generations, pros, cons, takeaways, things that help you grow as a coach, things that maybe even challenge you as a coach? Kind of how you share that is like, hey, how can I deal with this new generation now, because what was working then is not working now? Anything that you have, please let us know. We would love to know your experience with that.
As I mentioned before, I took a very non-traditional route through college, worked several years, decided, actually digging ditches, and decided that wasn't going to be for me long term, and went back into college, had a good social life at college to the point where college wasn't for me because it was too social. Put that nicely. And then went back to work, not digging ditches, moving up a little bit. But then at some point, my love of volleyball, and I knew I wanted to play further than what I was doing, and got into college. And when I first went to George Williams, the degree program that I chose, because it sounded easy, was outdoor leadership. And I loved being outdoors, and, leadership sounded good. Well, one of the first classes I had was new games. Now, remember, this was in a time period, the early 80s. I don't want to date myself too specifically, but it was the early 80s.
Yeah.
And we had a class called New Games. And the class basically was the forerunner of a lot of youth sports where everyone won. There was no losers competing. That everyone just participation. It was about the participation. We didn't keep score, that sort of thing. And it drove me crazy being in that class. I did not do well. The final came around, and I refused to take the final. I was a little bit younger and rebellious, shall we say.
I love
And
it.
the teacher said, "You're going to flunk the class." And I said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa. No, no, no. Everyone wins. Everyone wins." And she's like, and I'm like, "Hey, you're the one. This is exactly what you said. This is what the class means. Everyone wins." So she said, "Meet me in my office," kind of thing, and had a meeting with her, and she basically we came to the agreement that I would get a B in the class if I dropped out of outdoor leadership. And I said, "Okay, I can do that." So I got a B in the class, but I switched over to the physical education side, which was difficult for me because it was a lot of science. I also got a minor in science, if you can believe that, at the same time. And so a different path, and I got into the winning part of it again, where you compete for a reason. But as I started coaching and that new games mentality or that participation mentality started taking effect, you started seeing that in the athletes where they just had this expectation that they were doing okay because it didn't matter the results. It was more about the participation. At first, it was okay because the parents didn't have that mindset. The parents were still all about winning. So that became a little bit more prevalent to them. The next generation, where the parents were the kids that went through this participation thing, became much tougher because the kids then, when they went home, still got reinforced, well, that's okay. It was nice try. And that drove me crazy because if the focus wasn't there and they weren't improving, I wasn't willing to reward that. To me, there was still some expectations. So it's kind of slid downhill with that mentality. And the other part of it is when I was first in coaching, volleyball wasn't a big sport nationally. There were pockets of it. The Midwest, thankfully, was probably the second pocket, California being the first where volleyball's hotbed was. The Midwest was behind that, but it was probably the next prevalent one. Now we're seeing it on a national level where kids are playing volleyball in the deep South. When I got to the University of Mississippi, they had only in 2001, they had only had high school volleyball there just recently added. So, and I know there's some now, I think every state in the union now has high school volleyball, but in my younger days, that wasn't true. A lot of states just had it in the winter and so forth. So it's grown exponentially. The kids have so much more opportunity to play, and they started playing. Club was really for high school. We didn't have the younger kids playing. Now they're playing at 6 and 8 years old. I think there's a national championship for 8 and unders. So it's grown tremendously, and all for the good. There's no doubt about it. So what I see when the kids get to the collegiate level, they've played so long, breaking down some technical habits is it's much harder to fix. Where in your generation, Stasia, you were learning volleyball at an older age and didn't have as many reps, so it was a little bit easier maybe to change some habits because they weren't so embedded. So I get the mindset that playing is the best way to do things, and they've played a lot of volleyball. So I'm not changing nearly as much technically because the kids are so much more technically sound than what they were back in the day. But there's a lot that they can still learn that they haven't learned yet that I still think they have so much more potential as they learn about themselves and how to push themselves. The other aspect of club, while it's been excellent, is we went through a phase where if a kid wasn't happy, they just started the parents would just start their own clubs, and they just go play for someone else who made them happy. And remember, the parents are paying the clubs, so the clubs had to keep kids happy if they wanted to stay financially viable. So back in the day, I was probably the only option that the kids had, so they kind of had to do it my way. Now, there's 5, 6 other options out there that, if you don't like one coach, you just go play for someone else. And because of that, I don't think the kids are pushed to their potential because when you're doing that, players are uncomfortable, and uncomfortable is often misconstrued as a lot of different things and not what it really is, and a growth process. And because of that, I think a lot of younger players or players coming up through the junior ranks today aren't used to being pushed to their potential.
That's a good point. So we see that a lot in generations. So can I ask you about your training and the different generations? So do you feel like before you were spending more time on technical coaching, even with your college teams, and now you don't spend as much time on technical, but you do more? Where do you focus more on now?
Well, today, as I said, the kids are coming in so much more technically developed. There's still things that they could work on, maybe be a little bit more efficient in their technical development, things like that. But because of that, they don't like high reps. It's very monotonous to them. They don't see the end result as quickly. So we spend a lot more time instead of just doing high number of reps. And in the older way, maybe the older generation, my perspective was, especially that Asian style, they repped you to death, much more reps, and the play was very limited. And you got so many reps that then it came through in your play. But because of time constraints and the so forth, we don't rep as much. So we do a lot more playing and then just pick and choose our battles, shall we say.
I love the participation mentality and the way you framed that, and how participation versus self-development, kind of that battle back and forth. And yeah, I think the rep piece, there is less immediate reward, like each generation is like kind of coming to expect, but yet when their physical skills hit a ceiling, like they get to college and they only have that 5 to 10% improvement, or that physical skill they learned isn't serving them, that's really what you and I have worked a lot on with your team, is like, then what? How do you self-develop? And because reps really does equal confidence, whether it's mental fitness or physical fitness. And I do believe that you training us in that physical style that you've mentioned, just repping it out, was how I became a confident athlete in myself, that I knew how to troubleshoot. I knew how to coach myself once I left you, and was able to kind of take that on. It was like, I know my position. And I think what we're seeing is like there's always that yin yang, it's like, yes, okay, they're able to play more freely, they're able to understand the game maybe, until it doesn't work. And then what? Where is the foundation? And I think that you kind of just really named where mental fitness has stepped in, and where it has to kind of continue with this new way of, okay, well, you're not going to get the confidence this way, so we better build reps on this other side, or we're going to be in big trouble.
No, exactly. So spot on there. You know what I mean? And I think it is that, once they get to college and it's everyone was all state, everyone was their best player on their team, and you're not used to that role of sitting on the bench or playing behind someone that's better than you. And I think the aspect of, the foundation isn't there because they just got away with it at the level they were successful at. And, there are so many levels, even in junior volleyball, that, oh, I won a national championship, in the pink division, or the cobalt division or whatever. And it's still, there's so many teams playing, it's still a national championship, and I don't want to take it away, but there's also 14 levels above you that you can't compete with. And so when you're now here competing, how do you take that next step? And I think the introduction of what you've given me to utilize with the kids, and that the mentor reps and how they're looking at things, has been so important to the development of my team.
Yeah. I mean, it's been so cool to learn alongside you guys too, like what they need, what works, what doesn't work, and I mean, we've been able to do that in a lot of different environments and with different teams, but for some reason your team always stands out as the top experience of that. And I don't know if that's because you and I have a connection and we talk pretty frequently about it, or and I kind of maybe have that foundational piece with you, that I know how you were or are. And we've and you've been really clearly able to kind of almost diagnose what's going on, and then I just feel like we get into troubleshooting pretty easily. And it's by far like my favorite experience, that when we get to work with people, because you do have a unique athletes that really take it in and reach out and want to do this part of their experience, not just the physical side. It's been pretty cool.
I think we can speak to a bigger thing of athletes are physically bigger and stronger than what they've ever been. And that's, growing exponentially, just size wise and physical ability. Yet at the same time, because of parts of the mental development, they're a little bit behind of what I would say 40 years ago, what you expected an 18 or a 20-year-old to do. Just developmentally, they haven't been exposed to that for so many different reasons, not right or wrong. And because of that, they need that, nurturing through the mental side of it.
Yeah. We talk about this, like that there is a difference in their wiring. And once they can feel that same kind of sense of safety inside, that was easier back in the day before technology and before surveillance and all of these things that have impacted these kids. We get that flexibility a little bit back. And I think that's one of the things that when I first told you that, you're like, maybe. And then I think we've been able to see that restored resilience in them. And not that it's perfect, but that they at least have the awareness to understand that they could do something about it
Right.
and be empowered to not just fold and have to be subbed out for the rest of a match or benched or whatever had to happen before for them to reset. They're able to kind of do that a little bit more in real time and with more flexibility.
Yeah, no, and that's the area that we've seen tremendous growth in and continue to see it. And like you said, it's not perfect. It's never been perfect. It's not the world we live in, and it's not a game of perfect. So it lends itself to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thinking about what you said about the clubs and having all these options and and just connecting. Like I grew up in Puerto Rico and there was very limited leagues, and still now it's a little bit bigger. But even just the athlete that made it to college only had a few options for club or to find their next level. Compared to the kids now that our son right now is competing at the soccer level at the more competitive level. But you can see how all these different clubs have been created and how all these options are out there. Where I was growing up, that was two options, and they see the good league and the you just play for fun league, and that was it. And not everybody played in the good league, and that helped me decide. Like maybe for me, my background was baseball. I was like, maybe I'm not a baseball guy. Maybe I want to go into basketball, and it challenged you to make that decision at this magic age, which is right around 12, even 10 to 15, that you're like, okay, these guys are better, and I'm gonna go find my thing. And you have to, instead of just finding the right team that is at your level, just knowing that this is the level of play, and
Right.
are you either gonna do it for fun or you're gonna do it to reach your next level. With all those, like you said, there is 10 tournaments or 10 championships for one age group. Where when I was, it was one. It was like
Yeah, no,
there's one championship to win. You're either gonna make it or not, and
yeah.
you either have a chance or not, and that's what you work for.
Yeah. And we talk about this all the time with Gen Z specifically, and now the Gen Alpha is the next coming up, that they're the smartest generation we've ever raised because they've had access to learning all of these things from day one. And so now this expert that coaches, teachers, mentors used to be, it's not as established because they're like, I can go to YouTube and find 20 other teachers to teach me how to pass or how to learn how to drive or whatever it is. And so there's been a shift in what this generation demands relationship wise. And that's something I think we've also talked a lot about, is just like establishing that they do have a choice, but also that connection, once that's there, the loyalty that is there, and they do stay, and most of them don't want to go to a transfer portal or do all of the options or skip clubs. But it is putting a new spin on modern era coaching, is what we talk about in
Right.
our book, and what we talk about with you and other coaches that we speak to, is like, if you want the results you used to get, you have to invest in a different game a little bit with care, making sure they know you have their back. Because when they do, they will run through the same walls that Ray and I ran through for our coaches, and that you got that out of us. Do you see that? Do you think that's a thing that you're witnessing as this transition has happened
Yeah,
generation?
I think what I've had to do is show that in a different way. You know what I mean? I think I showed that with you by demanding and showing, just, I don't know if it was the most effective way, but that was the way of the culture at that time. Your parents treated you that way. You were demanded of certain expectations. Where today, because it's looked upon a little bit differently, I've had to adjust to them and what they're used to. So having a little bit more connection with them isn't something that I grew up with necessarily, but taking that time to do that with them and spending more time away from the court, doing other things. Some coaches always did that. That was within their personality. That wasn't necessarily my strength. But finding that through you and having that connection, I do see once that connection is there that I can then get to pushing them again. And when I'm saying giving feedback and coaching, they're not taking it personally because they understand that relationship a little bit more.
That's exactly it. I mean, you nailed it. And I think that a lot, hopefully, we can continue to build awareness around that they aren't necessarily weak or they're just different. They're just wired different. Their reward system is different. Their expectations are different. Like you've mentioned some great examples of that, but that they can have similarities when they get that restoration back and that flexibility. And it makes a better together scenario. I mean, it's been really neat to see the evolution of you telling me, now kids just knock on your door and come to your office just to say hi, and to tell you what they're doing. And I've watched that transformation happen season to season, and again, that speaks to you being willing to try new things and that the athletes also respond. And it's really cool to see how the culture has shifted. Even just this last time we were there, seeing the team and what they were sharing about, and their feedback on the forum after culture camp was like, we're so much closer than we've ever been. We're more authentic. We're trying to back this up. Obviously, we're talking before we got on that brings a new set of skills, that is like, okay, well, what does that really mean? But it was really cool to see that was their takeaway, that they felt that buy-in, that camaraderie, all those non-scale wins they were seeing, and you can see that coming through in their play. So it's pretty cool.
It is. It's awesome. And once again, as you push athletes, there's always that what's around the corner, and as you get them uncomfortable, some days they respond better to that, other days they take a step back, and it's never just a straight uphill climb. It's a journey, and being okay with that as a coach. In the past, maybe I hadn't been as acceptable to that, and then I just get frustrated myself. And that's probably the joy in coaching is back to me because of what you've introduced me to, and through the things you've talked about has helped me see that. And so now I am getting the results that I want, both on the court and off the court. It's and like I said in the very opening, it's never been about the wins. The wins always seem to take care of themselves. A lot of that is what talent you have on the floor from a physical standpoint, but then making sure that you're being able to have them reach their potential is a win.
Love that. Yeah.
I know. Me too. I just it's so cool. And I agree. Like we say that all the time. Like, when we tell people what we do, it doesn't matter whether we're in an airport, an elevator, or, anywhere. If it's a former athlete, they're like, first thing they say is, I needed that program. And we're servicing ourselves. And you could probably get into some stories about you and I in the gym. But the second thing that
that's a whole nother session.
That's a whole other podcast. I agree. And then the second thing they say is they talk about how they wish they would have enjoyed it more.
Right.
And I think that's what you're describing. Like when you have that relationship with your coach, when you know that you care about your teammates, when you're in it for whatever, the highs or the lows, the wins do come, the things you really want do arrive, but everyone walks away with all those non-tangible wins. That's what we all really want. And I think that's what's been neat to see in your program and other programs you've worked with, is that when you put things in the right order, those non-wins happen, and then that makes the wins almost secondary. Like it's easy at that point. If you, like you mentioned, you have to have a few things. You got to have the right physical talent, and some of those things. But overall, winning becomes easier, and so it's cool to see you or hear you say that, and know that that's been your experience.
So Joe, let's talk about mental fitness. Let me just pick your brain. What are some of the challenges you're seeing with your current athletes or this generation of athletes that you're coaching regarding mental fitness? What do they bring to the gym? What does it look in the court and outside of the court?
Well, I think, one of the things, we probably didn't label things nearly as much in the old days. We didn't have that knowledge base. It wasn't as broken down. We kind of beat it into you, for lack of a better term. And it was just being pushed, and you didn't have a say in the matter. With today's current athletes, they have lots of options, and there's a lot of things that is so different culturally. And so because of that, we have to spend much more time, they have to spend much more time on the mental side of things. And what they're used to is, when they're unsure, it just becomes that, back to the lizard brain kind of thing of fight or flight. And they don't do really well with that because they don't understand that. They may have learned that in their basic biology classes or so forth, but it has never really been put to them in a real term and what that means. They just know that they're anxious. And so because of that, I think your introduction to all of this and our student athletes, they're finding ways to kind of get back in touch with what they're feeling. And like I said, it's a rabbit hole. We never talked about feelings before. It didn't matter what you were feeling, just dig the damn ball kind of thing.
So real.
Um,
Yeah.
and it's as simple as that sounds. There were, of course, feelings, but I just said, okay, you want to win or you don't. You know what I mean? And this is what it's going to take to win, and you go do it again. Well, now there are much more, because they've been open to those ideas of feelings. And I'm not saying the old way was the best way by any stretch. It was a simple way, very one sided way, or one direction way. But because we're not dealing in that culture anymore, them understanding their feelings and how those feelings affect their performance. So being exposed to some visualization, to journaling, to some breathing exercises, things like that are so important, just so that they can understand, all right, this is happening, this is what I'm feeling, this is how I'm going to respond to it. And, the thing is, a lot of them fight that at first just because it seems silly. Kids that are more competitive are like, yeah, that has nothing to do with it. I just have to hit it harder. You have those type of athletes, which you love, except when they're hitting it in the net every time, I don't love it so much. You know what I mean? So getting them to understand, well, you're hitting it in the net because you're going at 300 miles an hour and you're not in control. So how can you regulate that a little bit? To the kids that then pull back because it's uncomfortable, and they don't want to move forward, they don't want to be pushed anymore, and what does that look like, and how are they dealing with that? And okay, coach, I don't understand this. And having those conversations and different resources that they have, so they can put it in a different perspective. So when that happens, they know that they need to, start calming themselves down or start firing themselves up, and not running away from the problem, that they can meet it head on and still achieve their goals. So I think with that, they're exposed to so much more of that type of thing, and having the resources that you provided us, and being able to share that with them, has allowed them to kind of put that in a better perspective, I think. And then through that, continually work on it. And it's different for every kid, what they need and how they approach it. So it becomes a little bit more of a science project. It's not cookie cutter. Um, but it's something that they can all do, and they have embraced it, and we're seeing the results with that. And it's, none of this is, gee, you do this and now you become an Olympian. I wish that it was that simple. And but there are other limitations to that. Maybe your experience, maybe your physicality, so forth. But what we're seeing is a trend in the right direction. So we're being able to break down some of those barriers through mental fitness.
That's awesome.
Love that.
Yeah. So one of the things that when I was listening that came up for me that I was thinking about your team is you mentioned fight and flight. And then we also have been working a lot on your team with the freeze response and how kind of the deer and headlights. And we were able to even type your team and talk about that one of the seasons we worked together, that you guys had more of that predominance to go to freeze individually and as a team. And I think that's really where you've learned the nuances of when to have feedback, how to have feedback, the voice of feedback, the tone, all of those things, recognizing that in service to your athletes, sometimes maybe the older style wasn't working as well, but also not just getting it off the table completely, that it's not okay to not sometimes raise voice or have some stern feedback, and that's also part of this. But I was just thinking about your team and how a lot of people don't know what freeze looks like in athletes. And a lot of people will say, oh, they're anxious or they're shutting down or, they're one play they're on and one play they're off. But just recognizing that that's a really overwhelmed internal athlete and there's ways they've got to work on it and ways that you can help them as coaches. I wonder if you just have any other thoughts to share on that or, just anything to add.
I think that is a great point, and that was probably one of the most foundational things that you taught me about when we first started working on this, and through a lot of the athletes back at that time. Was that sense of they just would shut down and it almost acted like they don't care. And if you know how much time and effort and energy athletes have to put in at the collegiate level, that's not true. I mean, they're putting in a lot of time, a lot of commitment. It's also misinterpreted by me as a coach that, gee, they just don't care, where that wasn't the case. And just changing the tone and re-asking or reframing my feedback to them help them be able to break through that. Not always easy for me because I thought it was just coaching, giving them feedback, but how you say stuff and what athletes need, which kind of feedback was very important and made huge strides in that area of connecting through that. So that was a big part of it.
Yeah, and it's that give take. It's like we like to always say it's not just the coach's job. Like the athletes are equally needing to pull their weight, but if we're asking the athlete to, then maybe as a coach we need to look at some of our ways that we're impacting and make some pivot points,
And
and
to
I
me,
yeah, go.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, I think that's a great point. I always just felt, and a lesson that I learned was I felt like I was giving in because I wasn't demanding. But at the same time, once I learned that and I could give them a little bit more space, I could come back to that and then push them again. And so much of what I see maybe in the juniors ranks and some college coaches is that you roll out the balls and you get to play and what you get is what you get. And I felt when I wasn't giving feedback, that's what I was doing. So just learning how to change the feedback, maybe lessening it, making it a little bit more specific, the tone, I'm a loud person, gym voice wise, having them understand that. Maybe ratcheting it down has been helpful as well. So, all my former athletes, I'm sorry. It was just a loud voice. Um, and once
All of us.
again, yeah, uh, you know, had I known this or had this as a tool, would I have been a much more productive coach? Could you have won, 700 games instead of 350? I don't know. I don't know at the time if that would have been as effective,
Right.
but I wish I had this just as much as the players, look at it and go, I wish I had this to deal with it. It's a two-way street. And I think that's the important thing. And I think that's the thing that what you're doing isn't just one way and it's the coach's fault because they're not ready to hear that. It's, wait a minute, you've got to hear this. How are you responding to it? And here's your responsibility in your response as well. As much as it is my responsibility of finding a different way to say things. So I think that's what's been so eye-opening to me.
Yeah, and I just wanna say, like, I think that all coaches that stay in for a while look at the way that they coach because we coach how we were coached, and I still have kids I saw in Starbucks that I coached 15 years ago. I'm like, "My bad, I didn't really get it. I wasn't a mom yet," or whatever, but I think that what always stood out to me with you and then what they tell me too is, like, they knew we cared. Like, I always knew that you had the best of intentions for me and my teammates and that you wanted us to succeed and that always shined through regardless of tone or you know compliments or whatever it was. Like I always knew that you had the best of interest and were truly my mentor of of making sure that I found my highest good. And, and anybody that I talk to that's played for you, that's what they say, is that. But to see now how that's evolved, to see these seniors and the comfort that they have with you, but yet a really clear athlete coach dynamic is really like the secret sauce. I feel like it's really cool to watch, and it is an evolution. Like the more we learn about science and the more we learn about all of this, and each generation changes, and it's up to us whether we pivot or not. I could have come 5 years ago and you'd been like, you're crazy, I'm not doing any of that. So I think it speaks a lot to you and your character and how you show up as a coach.
All right, Joseph, for our audience out there, if you have any advice, think about the parents having an athlete or athletes reaching to their next level. They're trying to reach maybe the higher club team, or they're trying to reach their next level, might be college, or even getting a bid for a pro contract or Olympian. What advice would you give that athlete?
I think as cliche as it might sound, is just have that growth mindset. I think that's probably the biggest thing is, too often we kind of get stuck in a rut, or you want to stay comfortable, but having that growth mindset of, taking feedback and understanding it and what it is and so forth, I think is really important, and continuing to grow. I mean, there's not even at my age, shall we say, there's not a day that doesn't go by that, I learned something new about myself, about the world, about people, that sort of thing. So continuing to have that, I think, is so important. And just know that, I think one of my favorite sayings that we use with the team is winning is hard. The reps gain the confidence, but it becomes more minute details the higher level that you go to, and embracing that's a good problem to have, and having that attitude will take you a long ways.
I love that. Yeah, there's a quote that I play with all the time, and it's like doing hard things, because hard things will become easy. Easy things will become boring. So if you just set to do easy things, it's pretty boring, right? So having that growth mindset is something hard, because you're never done.
Yep.
And that's
Exactly.
part of our journey here in this world, right?
For sure.
I got a fun question, Joe.
Oh yeah. I like this one too. I'm excited to hear your answer.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, here it comes.
All right, Joe, let's look back. You are 16 years old. What advice would you give yourself pursuing your career?
Boy, at 16, I don't know if I had a clue at 16. One, that's a long time ago. And two, I don't know if I had that idea of what I wanted to be or do at 16. Maybe that would have been a better question at 22. I was probably in a better mindset there.
Yeah, let's do that. Tell your 22-year-old self.
Yeah, I tell my 22-year-old self that one, to keep life in a balance a little bit more. I think, as I reflect at this age, I'd probably have a little bit more balance, just in the sense of the commitment level and the hours that I put in. I probably could have done a better job with my relationships, family-wise and so forth, had I had better balance. So that would be number one. And then number two would be continue to have that growth mindset myself. You know what I mean? I think that, that's an area that I probably could have done a better job at, and would have been a better coach having that going forward. So that's probably the things I would say.
I like that's a growth mindset, always a key.
Oh yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. So one of the most profound things that you said to me when I was heading off to college, kind of in this age range that we're talking about, was you sat me down and you gave me a journal and you gave me a copy of Desiderata, which is an amazing poem. And you told me that you said, Stasia, I just want you to know that this is volleyball is an ends to a means. And I just remember looking at you like, what are you talking about? I have no idea what that means. Like, explain. And you were you explained to me one of the most, I think, probably biggest lessons that I needed to learn, I didn't know yet that I would learn, which was that volleyball was a means to my education and the next layer of life and the growth and all the things that would come. And I think you even mentioned like things beyond college, like marrying a person and having a family and all, and this is my person, and just, but it was one of those things that I always kind of came back to and remembered. And because you get to the college path or the next path in your life and you're just like, this isn't what I thought it was going to be like. What am I doing here? Like, this isn't at all what I thought, but I just think, kind of having that trust in the process of like, it's the means of getting you to where you are, and you describing your career and, all the where places it's taken you. And, yeah, the balance, like obviously you shared a lot with the athletes, and it's always trying to figure out how do we keep that, that place in things. But yeah, just came to mind as something that reminded me of my own self when I was in those ages with you and how you impacted my process for sure. Yeah.
Well, good. And I think that's one of the, I don't know, as a coach, you make, I don't know, mission statement or your values. And, I think I always felt like it could use volleyball to teach life lessons, and how much sport in general teaches people about life lessons if done correctly, and put in that perspective, whether it's relationships or jobs or family or whatever it is going forward. And the same issues that you have playing sports, you're going to find those in other aspects of your life, and the lessons that you learn through that and how you view yourself is so important in that. So hopefully that's a big part of what my athletes feel when they're done, that they have learned enough about themselves to be successful in all phases and aspects of their life going forward. And that's our goal here.
Yeah. I
love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I experienced that talking to Megan on our past show, and she expressed the journey and how appreciative and grateful she is for the experience that she had. And like we're talking about, how she's taken that to her career now as a teacher and coaching club and coaching high school teams. So it's a means to end. It's quite a mean.
Yeah, it's that life and sport wins. I mean,
absolutely.
I just am constantly amazed at how long I've known you and how many different chapters we've had. And I think athletes having those opportunities with their teammates and their coaches and through these experiences is just, it does impact who you are and how you show up. It's huge.
Well, good. That's why we do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's that love for it. And I think our last thing is just like, is there anything else we've left off or that you want to share that we haven't covered? Anything else you want to say?
No, I just think that, what you guys are doing and how you present it is so amazing, that I hope you can get it to more people, because I do see it as a tool and a resource for people that may be a little bit confused or aren't at that spot yet in their journey. And, I think that you have something very special. And I'm glad that you have taken it upon yourself to kind of adopt Winona State volleyball and Winona State in general, just to share that, because it is something that is so cool and has already benefited so many people. So keep going. It's some neat stuff you have going there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, your mentorship in it has I think made it that much sweeter. So it's just been fun to be in connection the way we are and being able to share all these timelines. It's like, I really think it's one of life's biggest gifts. So it's just been so fun to be able to keep diagnosing and identifying, okay, that's the next layer. That's the thing we need to address now, and being able to be so flexible with that and then have you and your team embrace it has just been a really cool dance and unexpected for sure. But just so cool. And I agree, it's created this really useful thing because it's come from the think tank of a coach's perspective, all this nerdy science and degrees, like you said, and then the athletes coming in and sharing. And I think in that way, it really serves as that generational advocacy that matters so much to Ray and I, is that everyone's seeing each other and relating and appreciating the things that we bring to the table instead of seeing them as, oh, well, Joe's a boomer and he's a Barker or whatever, it's like, no, Joe's Joe. And now look at and you're a Gen Z, and that doesn't mean you're weak and fragile and I can't push you. Like, look at you guys, like you're strong,
Sure.
you're confident, you're beautiful women, so it's just been such a neat thing. And I'm just so grateful for you, Joe. And thank you for being here, sharing even more of your story.
Thank you. Thank you. My first podcast. So
Hey.
Nailed it. I love it. I'm so glad. Ray and I have been so excited to have you on because it is a unique story.
Yeah.
And it's just really neat to share it with more people, and hopefully they'll see themselves somewhere in the journey. So thank you. Really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
So Joe, thank you for joining us today on the Next Level Advantage Show. This is something we've been wanting to do for a long time. It's been an amazing journey. You've been a huge part of our journey and our growth mindset. So thank you for sharing your amazing story, and I appreciate your friendship and the connection that we will always have.
Yeah, me too. Looking forward to more of it.
Us too. We'll do more.
All right.
All right, Joe. Take care.
Thank you.